Have you ever been deemed by society as a social outcast or socially challenged? Have you ever considered one of those groups that society cannot accept as cool or popular? I'm sure that many of us have been in one of those situations, and I know that I have. Now, this is not going to be a video about how, my life sucks because I'm not considered cool. Because, fortunately, my life is not determined by how society defines me. However, I would like to make a observation about a certain group of people that society has deemed as weird. And one of those groups are the nerd and geek category of people. And there are many different things about nerds and geeks. And back in the day, nerd and geek was actually considered a very derogatory term. And very, very, people made fun of them a lot. And nobody wanted to be a nerd or geek. However, times have changed, and things are a little bit different, and so it's kind of interesting about how nerd and geek are now. It's no longer really a derogatory term. Now, there are people in this world that do not want to be a nerd or do not want to be a geek. However, there are some people that actually realize that their title as a nerd or geek is actually an advantage to them, or is actually a very good thing. But what I want to talk about is really what is a nerd and what is a geek. Okay? Because we use terms very lightly in our culture, and all of us mean different things, and we have different conceptions. Okay? Now, a nerd and geek, a lot of times when someone uses that, it comes to mind, like in all the videos that we see about nerds and geeks are very, very, like, skinny guys that have really big glasses, and they talk real funny, and they're just like, and they wear weird clothes, and they have zits all over their faces, and they play, certain games, board games and video games, of things that no one else ever does except this group of people, and all this stuff. So there's, lots of visions and stuff like that, and things that we see. However, what exactly is the difference between a nerd and a geek? Because there's a subtle difference. And it's really good to just know what exactly this is. Now, I'm not a dictionary, and I'm not looking up, on Wikipedia exactly what they define as this, but this is just some observations that I've kind of come up with a general idea of what a nerd and a geek is and what the difference is. Pretty much a nerd is someone who is very interested in a certain topic to the point of they're a very big fan of it, or they are a follower of it, or basically they know a lot about a certain topic or subject or person. So a nerd really is just someone who, we don't want to call it obsessed with something, because obsession is a strong word, but it's someone who could be obsessed with it if they didn't have their priorities right, if you get what I'm saying. Okay? And that's what I believe a nerd is. So anything that you just know a lot about and you are very interested in, it's a passion of yours. Okay? So, for example, we all know that there are Star Wars nerds. And Star Wars nerds are the guys and girls that are just very, very into Star Wars. And they dress up, like Star Wars characters, and they know a lot about them. So those would be considered nerds, and we all, we know that. And then there's just nerds that play certain games like Dungeons and Dragons and all those different types of card games like Pokemon and stuff like that. There's those type of nerds. There's nerds that, it could be anything. Lord of the Rings nerds. Now, those are some very typical ones. However, our definition of nerd also would include people who know a lot about cars. But we don't call them car nerds. Those guys that are, I know all the different things about the liters and the headers and the type of engines and horsepower and all that stuff. those people who know a lot about cars, we don't call them nerds. Okay? We call them car buffs. You know, and it's like, wait a second. They're actually car nerds. Really, when it comes down to it, they're car nerds. But because a lot of times car buffs are also the cool people, they can't take the title of nerd. But I'm sorry, that's what you are. You're a nerd if you're a car buff. All right? Now, I don't think that nerd or geek is a derogatory term. It's cool to know a lot about a certain subject. In fact, there's people that get paid millions of dollars because they know a lot about a certain subject. In fact, a lot of times nerds are paid because they are a nerd. Okay? So a nerd is anybody who knows a lot about stuff. Now, where does the title of geek come in? Well, there's nerds that are computer nerds. Okay? Technology nerds. And so, technology nerds, basically someone who's very interested in technology, knows a lot about technology, it's a passion of theirs, those are geeks. So, a geek is basically a type of nerd, if you get what I'm saying. A geek is a technology nerd. That's really what a geek is. So, there's basically nerd is the overarching category, and then geek is a type of nerd. Okay? And a geek is a technology nerd. So, here's the thing. If you're a geek, you are also a nerd. So you're a technology nerd, but we call you geek. Now, if you are a car nerd or a Lord of the Rings nerd, you're not a geek. Okay, if you get what I'm saying. So if you're a geek, you're also a nerd. But if you're a nerd, you're not necessarily a geek. All right. So that's a kind of a subtle difference between the two. But you know, it's just interesting that's what the thing. But I am personally a nerd and a geek. So pretty much I am a nerd and a geek because I'm a nerd about technology, so I'm a geek. But I'm also a nerd in different areas too. And I'm very proud of it. I like being a nerd and geek, you know. And, you know, here's the thing. There are people that are paid millions of dollars because they're nerds and geeks. So, and nowadays, the derogatory term of nerd and geek is not really considered very bad anymore. A lot of people know that nerds and geeks are actually worth something to this world. Now, there are some people who are nerds and geeks that aren't, that, you know, that it's ridiculous, okay? It's like, all right, guys, you need to calm down. But a lot of times, nerds and geeks, there's nothing wrong with that. So what are you? Are you a nerd? Are you a geek? What are you a nerd of? Okay? Post your comments on my Facebook, MySpace, the YouTube channel, whatever. All right? So what are you? Nerd or geek? Now, if you're a nerd and you're a geek, wear your title proudly on your shoulder and let's take on the world. That's it for today, and always remember, my name is James, and I am your friend.